Only on 4 tonight, a Fairfax County man convicted of shooting his girlfriend as the two rode in his SUV is headed to prison for 23 years.
Instead of calling 911, the man drove to a hospital and later told police his girlfriend fired the fatal gunshots herself. The victim's loved ones tonight are disappointed with the judge's decision.
Northern Virginia Bureau Chief Julie Carey spoke to them after the sentencing.
April 17th, 2024. A man walks into Mount Vernon Hospital with blood all over his hands. His girlfriend? Dying in his back seat. But here's the thing. He didn't call 911. He drove her there himself. And when police asked what happened, girl, his story kept changing. First, it was a shooting outside a karaoke club. Then it was self-defense. Then, he said she shot herself. Make it make sense. In every home, behind every closed door, there's a story waiting to be uncovered. Welcome to Dark Whispers, where we dive deep into the hidden truths of domestic crime and the relationships that turn deadly. If you're drawn to real stories, powerful insights, and the shadows most people avoid, you're in the right place. Subscribe now and step into the whispers they never wanted you to hear. Kate Laporta was 38 years old, a mother of two, her daughter, Caitlin, and her son, who was just 10 years old at the time. By all accounts, Kate was the kind of woman who held her family together, the kind of mother who showed up, who loved hard. Her family would later describe her as everything to them, their whole world. And then there was Max Nguyen, 47 years old, Fairfax County. He and Kate were in a relationship, but like a lot of relationships that end in tragedy, the details of what went on between them stayed mostly behind closed doors. What we do know is this. On that April night, Kate got into Max's SUV, and she never made it back home. So here's where things get real. April 17th, 2024. Kate and Max are together. At some point during the evening, they're in his SUV. Now, what exactly led up to what happened next? That's where Max's stories start to split into 100 different directions. But what we know for sure is that a gun went off. Kate Laporta was shot, and instead of grabbing his phone and dialing 911 like any reasonable person would do, Max made a choice. He got behind the wheel and drove. No ambulance. No frantic call for help. Just him and Kate, bleeding out in his vehicle, heading to Mount Vernon Hospital. And girl, when he pulled up to that hospital, when he finally got her inside, it was already too late. Kate's injuries were fatal. She would die from that gunshot wound. But the questions? Oh, the questions were just getting started. When police arrived at that hospital and saw Max standing there with blood all over his hands, they knew something wasn't right. So they started asking questions. Simple questions. What happened? Where did this happen? How did she get shot? And Max, he had answers. Problem is, none of them made sense. First story, they were outside a karaoke club. There was crossfire. Some random shooting. Kate got caught in it. Tragic accident, right? Wrong. Because that story didn't last long. When police started pressing him, when they started looking at the evidence, Max switched it up. Second story. Okay, so maybe it wasn't crossfire. Maybe it was in the SUV. They were having a dispute, an argument. Kate had a gun. She pointed it at him. He tried to defend himself. The gun went off. She shot at him, missed, and then, get this, she turned the gun on herself. Now, this is where Max really committed to the lie. He told police, "She pushed my hand out as I was turning into our driveway, and she turned the gun on herself and fired this way. I don't know how she did it. I just saw her turn and fire." Period. That's what he said. Word for word. Like that made any kind of sense. Like a woman in the middle of an argument would just randomly shoot herself. like the evidence would back that up. Spoiler alert, it didn't. Because here's the thing. Prosecutors would later call Max's story what it really was: a lie. Not just one lie, but dozens of them. Every time he opened his mouth, a new version came out. Every time police challenged him, he switched it up. And the physical evidence? It wasn't matching up with anything he was saying. The gun, the angle of the shot, the blood patterns, the trajectory. None of it lined up with a self-inflicted wound. None of it lined up with Kate shooting herself. What it did line up with? Max Nguyen shooting Kate Laporta while they were in that SUV together. And then, instead of saving her life, he made a choice. He drove her to a hospital, giving himself time to come up with a story that would fall apart the moment investigators actually did their job. So now we're at the part where investigators start putting the pieces together. And girl, it didn't take long for them to realize Max's story was full of holes. Big ones. First off, the forensic evidence. When you shoot yourself, there's a specific way the wound looks. The angle, the powder burns, the distance. All of it tells a story. And Kate's wound? It wasn't telling the story Max was trying to sell. The trajectory of the bullet, the way it entered her body, none of it was consistent with someone turning a gun on themselves. It was consistent with someone else pulling that trigger. Then there's the issue of the gun itself. Max kept saying Kate had the gun, that she was the one waving it around, that she fired it. But when investigators looked at the evidence, when they examined everything from that SUV, his version of events just wasn't adding up. The positioning, the forensics, the blood spatter patterns. Everything pointed to one conclusion. Max Nguyen shot Kate Laporta. And let's talk about those changing stories for a second. Because this is where Max really messed up. See, when you tell the truth, your story stays the same. You don't have to remember what you said because it actually happened. But when you're lying, when you're making it up as you go, you slip up, you contradict yourself, you add details that don't make sense. You change major parts of the story hoping nobody notices. Max went from random shooting outside a karaoke club to she shot at me then killed herself, like those were even in the same universe of believability. And investigators? They documented every single contradiction, every single lie. Because that's what you do when someone's trying to cover up a murder. But here's what really sealed it for investigators: Max's behavior. Think about it. Your girlfriend, the mother of 2 children, is shot. She's dying. And you don't call 911? You don't scream for help? You don't do everything in your power to save her life in those critical minutes? Instead, you get in a car and drive. You waste precious time. Time that could have been spent with paramedics trying to stop the bleeding. Time that could have been the difference between life and death. That's not panic. That's not shock. That's someone trying to figure out how to explain what they just did. That's someone buying time to come up with a story. And investigators knew it. Moving on to the evidence that really mattered. The detectives went through everything: phone records, text messages, any history between Max and Kate that might explain what happened that night. They interviewed people who knew them. They built a timeline. And what they found was a man who shot his girlfriend and then tried to lie his way out of it. The case went to the prosecutors. And when they looked at everything investigators had gathered, they knew they had enough. Enough to prove that Max Nguyen murdered Kate Laporta. Enough to prove that his self-defense story was nonsense. Enough to prove that Kate didn't shoot herself. Because she didn't. Max shot her, and then he let her die.
This was Max Nguyen minutes after he brought his mortally wounded girlfriend to Mount Vernon Hospital on April 17, 2024, showing his blood-stained hands to police, at first telling them his girlfriend, Kate Laporta, had been shot in crossfire outside a karaoke club, later changing his story to claim that during a dispute in his SUV, the mother of two fired at him, then shot herself.
She pushed my hand out as I was turning into our driveway, and she turned the gun on herself and fired this way. I don't know how she did it. I just saw her turn and fire.
Prosecutors say that was just one of dozens of lies Nguyen told police. In September, jurors not buying his story, convicting him of second-degree murder and a firearms charge. The second-degree murder conviction carries up to 40 years in prison. Prosecutors and the victim's family asking the judge to impose the full 40 years. But the judge today sentencing Nguyen to 23 years behind bars. Caitlin Lasky, the victim's daughter, disappointed with the judge's decision.
It wasn't enough. It wasn't enough, honestly. I think he should have gotten the full 40 and plus some. The death of my mother has impacted me so badly, I just don't get sleep at night. I mean, we lost what was equivalent of everything.
Laporta'S father telling the judge in his victim impact statement that the murder has brought, quote, absolute destruction to their family.
Murdered my daughter, and you ask yourself, he got 23 years. It's just not enough.
Lasky worries about her little brother, just 10 years old when his mom was killed. She keeps memories of her mom close with this tattoo that matches one that Laporta had.
I wear her jacket. It's what I'm wearing right now, is one of her jackets. I got a tattoo for her. Honestly, the only thing I can do is keep her memory alive, because there's so many people who didn't get to meet her, and they should have.
In Fairfax County, I'm Julie Carey, News 4.
If Max Nguyen serves his full term, he will be in his early 70s when he is released.
Max Nguyen was arrested and charged with second-degree murder and a firearms charge. When the case finally went to trial, prosecutors laid it all out. Every lie Max told. Every piece of evidence that contradicted his story. Every reason the jury should see this for what it really was. A murder. The defense tried. They tried to sell Max's version of events. They tried to make it seem like maybe, just maybe, Kate really did shoot herself. But the jury, they weren't buying it. Not for a second. In September, after hearing all the evidence, after seeing through every lie Max tried to tell, the jury came back with their verdict. Guilty. Guilty of second-degree murder. Guilty on the firearms charge. And just like that, Max Nguyen's lies caught up with him. Now, second-degree murder in Virginia, that carries up to 40 years in prison. And Kate's family, they wanted every single one of those years. They wanted Max to spend the rest of his life behind bars for what he did. Prosecutors asked the judge for the full 40 years. Kate's family stood up in that courtroom and begged for justice. But when the judge handed down the sentence, 23 years. 23 years for taking Kate's life. 23 years for lying to police over and over again. 23 years for shooting a mother of two and then letting her bleed out instead of calling for help. And Kate's family? They were devastated. Because 23 years didn't feel like justice. Not even close. Caitlin Lasky, Kate's daughter, spoke after the sentencing. And her words? They hit hard. It wasn't enough. It wasn't enough. Honestly, I think he should have gotten the full 40 and plus some. She wasn't wrong. Because how do you put a price on a mother's life? How do you calculate what 23 years means when someone took everything from you? When they took the person who was your whole world? Caitlin talked about how her mother's death affected her. How she doesn't sleep at night anymore. How the loss is so deep, so complete, that it feels like losing everything. And it was everything. Kate wasn't just a mother. She was the center of that family, the person who held them together. Kate's father also gave a victim impact statement to the judge. He called what happened to his family absolute destruction. Because that's what murder does. It doesn't just take one life. It destroys everyone connected to that person. It leaves behind trauma and pain and questions that never get answered. It leaves behind children who have to grow up without their mother. And speaking of those children, Kate's son was only 10 years old when his mother was killed. 10 years old. An age where you still need your mom for everything. An age where you're supposed to feel safe and loved and protected. Instead, he had to process the fact that his mother was gone, that someone took her away, that she was never coming home. Caitlin worries about her little brother, about how he's coping, about what kind of man he'll grow up to be without his mother there to guide him. And that weight? That's something she carries now. The responsibility of keeping her mother's memory alive for him, for everyone who didn't get to know Kate the way they did. Kate's father said it plainly to the judge. Murdered my daughter. And you ask yourself, he got 23 years something. It's just not enough. And honestly, he's right. Because no amount of time brings Kate back. No sentence makes the pain go away. No verdict undoes what Max Nguyen did that night in his SUV. But 23 years? When prosecutors and the family asked for 40, it felt like a slap in the face. Max Nguyen will spend the next 2 decades behind bars. He'll have time to think about what he did. Time to sit with the fact that he took a mother away from her children. Time to remember all those lies he told, thinking he could get away with it. But Kate's family, they got a lifetime sentence. A lifetime of birthdays without her, holidays without her, graduations and weddings and grandchildren she'll never meet. A lifetime of missing someone who should still be here. Caitlin keeps her mother's memory alive in the ways she can. She wears Kate's jacket, the one she was wearing during the interview after sentencing. She got a tattoo that matches one her mother had. Physical reminders that Kate existed, that she mattered, that she was loved. Honestly, the only thing I can do is keep her memory alive because there's so many people who didn't get to meet her. And they should have, Caitlin said. And that's the tragedy in all of this. Kate Laporta should still be here. She should be watching her son grow up. She should be there for her daughter. She should be living her life. But Max Nguyen took that away from her. He took it away from her family. And no prison sentence, not 23 years, not 40 years, not life, will ever make that right. This case is a reminder of how quickly everything can change, how someone you trust, someone you're in a relationship with, can become the person who ends your life. Domestic violence doesn't always look like what we expect. Sometimes it's a gunshot in an SUV. Sometimes it's a man with blood on his hands telling lies to cover up what he did. Sometimes it's a family left behind, begging for justice that never feels like enough. Kate Laporta was 38 years old, a mother, a daughter, a sister. Someone's everything, and she deserved better than what Max Nguyen gave her. She deserved better than a man who shot her and then tried to blame her for her own death. She deserved a life, and her family deserved to have her in it. But instead, they got grief. They got loss. They got a courtroom and a sentence that didn't match the crime. And they got the burden of carrying Kate's memory forward, making sure the world knows who she was, making sure she's not just remembered as a victim, but as a person, a mother who loved her children, a woman who mattered. That's Kate's legacy. Not the way she died, but the way she lived. And the people who loved her will make sure that's the story that gets told.